Welcome everyone back to the channel and another broadcast. My name is Paul, very happy member of CA, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined this afternoon by David.
Hello, my name's David. I'm an alcoholic and I'm phoning in from Suffolk. Thank you for having me.
Glad you're here, David. And Ashley.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Paul, and inviting me. Yeah, I'm Ashley. I'm a drug addict. Thank you.
Always great to hear you both. And Stephen.
Recovered drug addict from Utah, and I'm honored to be with my friends here today.
Brilliant stuff, everybody. Thanks so much for coming on to the podcast. So today we are going to be getting into some of our favorite excerpts from our basic textbook called Alcoholics Anonymous, which we often call the Big Book, which you can read or listen to 24/7 completely free at aa.org. So we're going to put it up on the screen. Bear in mind, you can pause and rewind this podcast at any time. You can forward it to whosoever you wish. Feel free to reach out and get involved in the conversation below where you see this posted, be it on Skype, WhatsApp in the rooms, or YouTube. None of us are spokespersons for CA. We're just members sharing our experience, strength, and hope. If you're struggling with drug addiction, please check out also some of the other podcasts. There's now about nearly 4 dozen broadcasts on this channel on each of the steps, the spiritual malady, the ABCs of addiction. There's about 8 personal stories. So please check those out. Later on, towards the end of this podcast, we'll be putting on the screen some information about how to get to face-to-face and Zoom meetings. So please have a look at that. There's a lot of support out there. Get involved, get connected. So without further ado, I'm really pleased. So it's a new format, family. We're going to be looking at the Big Book, which somewhere on this screen, I believe I have, or I did have, it's vanished. How about that? It's here somewhere. So David, I'm going to hand the floor over to you, and David's going to share something from the Big Book.
Hi there, my name's David, and I'm going to be sharing from the very top of page 76.
Go ahead, David.
Okay, so page 76. If we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. When ready, we say something like this: My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and to my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We have then completed step 7. So why have I picked this particular part of the Big Book? Well, for me, it's a really rather special part because for a lot of people, I think of it as the forgotten steps. So it's sort of somewhere in the middle of the journey, and you've come across step 1, where you've decided to find and search for a higher power that has meaning to yourself. You've already taken an inventory and looked at what's happened in the past, individual moments, individual situations, as you were. And from this particular point is to look at a defect, so a common theme. So a good example of a defect would be anger, or maybe loneliness, or fear. So some of these feelings can be really quite strong, powerful triggers for those of us that are addicts or alcoholics. And so the idea behind this is as such. First off, to have a God of your own understanding, or as I like to call it, a higher power. To then have a bit of a think about some of the core themes that have really been a situation for yourself. e.g., loneliness or anger or fear, and then to ask God to remove these from you. In other words, to be able to draw a line under what's happened before and to maybe replace it with something better. So maybe replacing anger for something more positive like love, or loneliness maybe being replaced by friendship, or fear maybe serenity or acceptance. So thank you for letting me read. Pleasure as always. The floor is yours.
Over to you, Ashley.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Cheers, David, for the reading. Yeah, I'm a drug addict. Yeah, that what was read out there was pretty powerful, really. My experience towards step 6, where it kind of empathized willingness and being dispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all of the things which we had admitted or objectionably? And for me, in my drug addiction, I was somebody that didn't like the kind of things that I was doing, but then I was, as soon as the thought came in, I would be, as much as I wanted to stop, I just couldn't have the initial, that willpower to stop. And, step 6 was, before I got to step 6, it was, being, honest with myself to step 1 and, understanding that I'm kind of powerless over that thought and that idea that, it's going to be all right this time. And, when I got to step 6, it's letting God remove from us all the things which we have admitted, like it says in the book, and, being sort of humble and just being humble around the situation of letting the higher power have some sort of power within me to kind of restore my thinking and my thoughts to a saner sort of place, really. So yeah, that's kind of my sort of put on that. But if there's any sort of newcomers listening to this, or anyone that's new into the fellowship, it's it's worth it. But yeah, it's a really good process to follow. But I'll leave it there. Cheers, thank you.
Good stuff, Ashley. Stephen.
Thank you very much. My name is Stephen, and I am a recovered drug addict. I've recovered from crystal meth, amphetamine, heroin, and whiskey. So there you go. It's interesting. I find 6 and 7 are a paragraph each. As he was reading that, I was sitting here contemplating what to talk about. My mind went to when I did the steps for the first time with my sponsor. He had me, of course, do 4, and then he and I sat down and did 5. And we did it at the hall here in Salt Lake. And after we went through my resentments and my fears and my sex inventory, which, didn't take very long at all, because I figured it out right away. It's always been me. Halfway through my resentments, I figured out it was me. But 6 and 7, after we did 5, he walked away, told me to go under that tree and sit for an hour, and I did, and I prayed, and then we came back and we did 6 and 7. And after we did 6 and 7 is the one and only time that my sponsor had me do a gratitude list. After we completed 6 and 7, he slid a piece of paper across the table and he said, "I want you to write 10 good things about you, Stephen." And I found that odd because I didn't expect that from him, and I did. And I still have that gratitude list. Character defects, God has taken away most of my all of my horrible character defects. He took my profanity away. He took that away within 3 months in the program. My sponsor made it very clear to me that I can't go to a meeting and say whatever I want to say. I just can't. Character defects, like I said, I still have little character defects. I'm not perfect. I never will be. I give them to God, and then I don't think he's doing a quick enough job with them, and I take them back. And, this is a journey. It's a journey where we're on a spiritual path, and we're all trying to walk this together. This is not a self-help group. It is a spiritual program of action. And I do love the book, and it constantly speaks to me. As I go out from here to do your bidding. Yeah. Yeah, isn't that interesting? As I go out from here to do your bidding. That's what I do every day. I try to help people in the program, and I try to help fellow men out there in the world. So thank you for choosing that, David, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. That was great. Everything happens for a reason. And 1 hour, 20 minutes ago, I actually worked step 6 with somebody. And naturally speaking, I had no idea David was about to take us to page 76, which is where steps 7 and 6 are, on page 76. That's one of the few pages I remember for that reason. And of course, when I take someone through the process, I use the 12 and 12.2, which has 6 or 7 pages on each of these steps. So that's how I work step 6 and 7, using the 12 and 12 as well. And what's amazing is we came up with a list of character defects on the left and character assets on the right, and there's usually around 1.5 dozen on each side. And then we prayed through them. I prayed, they prayed through the defects, and then I prayed, they prayed through the assets. And it was a very blessed process. And the reality is that God does take away character defects, whether it's pride, arrogance, lust, all that good stuff. It's all there, thoughtlessness, dishonesty, secretiveness, arrogance, rebelliousness, self-righteousness, being dishonorable, inauthentic, being false, a large part of this process and this program, I think, is about becoming true, thinking the truth, speaking the truth, and practicing the truth. That is largely the solution. If I'm true, Stephen and Ashley and David, then I'm clear on my consequences, then I will not drink or use again, because I'm clear on the consequences. For me to do so, as I understand it, would be being false to myself. It'd be opting to have all the character defects in operation again, and all the consequences. And another interesting point is the character assets. I think it's really important to make a list of character assets when working step 6. That of a good heart, a kind heart, a compassionate, patient, forgiving heart, positive and balanced, and capable and communicative. It's really important to be in the solution. And to see that that's how God sees us, and by the time we get to step 7, someone said to Wilson, God gave Wilson great wisdom in the wording of these steps, exact nature, defects, and shortcomings. And step 7, someone said to him, where do you put the miracle? He said, I put it in 6 and 7. And that's the brotherhood of man. I can tell you that most step 6s and 7s look virtually identical, having seen quite a few. Not to diminish the importance to the individual going through each process. Of course, it's important to them, but they do look the same. I don't usually tell the persons that. But at any rate, that's where the miracle is, because that's where you see that these defects and assets are common to almost everyone to some degree. And of course, in step 7, which is the first step of the second half of the steps, you get the word humbly, which is a word that uniquely appears in all the steps. You don't get any word quite like that. So, I think I'll leave it with this. By the time we get to step 7, folks, we're hopefully working with others. We're hopefully reading the literature every day. We've got our own personal faith and trust in God, and we're listening and growing. So thanks for letting me share. Ashley, I'm just going to hand the floor over to you, my brother.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks for touching on that and asking me to come along this afternoon. But yeah, I'm relating to a lot what everyone else has shared, and within my experience of addiction and coming to terms with the idea that myself and my own will and my own kind of self-knowledge around being able to stop is something that I can't do. And this is why I came into the program of, Cocaine Anonymous, and got introduced to the 12-step kind of movement, because it kind of, like what David was reading earlier, when we get to step 6 and 7, a person, or, someone that's going through the work as a newcomer, that's, getting to understand about this high power stuff, I think as an addict myself, the whole process is really beautiful, because it enables us to tap into this power that restores our mind and our thinking, and our warped thinking to a sort of a substantial kind of better sort of situation. And that's been my kind of experience around the chapters that have been read. 8 and 9, we have little of all persons we'd harmed, and that's another thing. We get to write down, we actually get to sit down as drug addicts and write our defects of character, and look at who we've harmed and who we've done all this. And that's the beautiful thing about the program. We get to look at our part and make amends where possible. But yeah, I'll leave it there then, Paul.
Well, I was going to ask you, do you have a portion of the book that you want to look at, Ashley?
Yes, that would be great, Paul. I will look at more about alcoholism. Is that okay?
Yeah. What page?
Chapter 3, and it's page 30.
Right.
Shall I wait until you've got it on the screen?
Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, I'll read chapter 3, more about alcoholism. Yeah, Ashley, drug addict. Most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of the illusion of the astonishing many pursue into the gates of insanity or death. We learn that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people are presently maybe has to be smashed. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. All of us felt at times that we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led into a pitfall, incomprehensible demoralization. We are convinced to a man that the alcoholics of our type are in the grip of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better. We are like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. I'll leave it there, Paul.
Do you want to share for a minute on what you've read, Ashley?
Yes, that would be brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Paul. I'll share on that. Yeah, so chapter 3, more about alcoholism. Yeah, from my experience around more about alcoholism, and coming into the rooms and listening to others talk about alcoholism, or sharing their experience around it. I wasn't really kind of wise or had any kind of inkling around what it meant, but then sort of coming to terms with around me coming into the rooms on a regular basis, and listening, more importantly, I think, and getting some identification with other people and obviously my own experience, in more importantly, around more about alcoholism and kind of identifying my experience within that chapter and seeing if I had kind of any, any sort of match with that. And it just kind of sums it all up, really, for me, really. The grips of addiction for me was that I'd swear off that I'd never do it again, but then just constantly not really able to kind of have any substantial control over that thought, because that's what it was. It was the thought of using, or that idea that I can use safely or normally, and that wasn't the case. And for me, as much as I wanted to kind of stop for loved ones or people within the family, it just wasn't my story. And that's how I came to terms with more about alcoholism. It kind of says it a few chapters down, the delusion that we are like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed. And that was my experience. I had to kind of get into a place where I just, I'd had enough. Enough was enough, and I was ready to look at step one and be willing to go to any lengths. I understand that might look differently to other people, but yeah, I just got into a place that I'd just been smashed to pieces around that idea that using was cool. And now I'm in a position where sort of Cocaine Anonymous is cool, and sharing the message, and working with others, and getting other people well. But yeah, I'll leave it there, Paul. Thank you.
Like, great to hear you, great share, good stuff. Stephen, over to you.
Thank you very much. Step one. Step one is about honesty. Most of us are unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. Honesty. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. Honesty. When I work with a new man, I tell him, you cannot lie to me, because if you're going to lie to me, you're going to waste your time. You're not going to waste my time, because I will learn something from working with you, but you're going to waste your time. You need to be completely honest. Step one is very important. You hear it said it's the, one of the most important steps. I probably wouldn't argue that fact with you. That wasn't a beer you heard. That was a Coca-Cola, by the way. I remember, I used to say things like this. I would steal from somebody, or I would lie to somebody, and I would say to myself, well, nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to know I did that. Well, see, the problem with that is I was calling myself nobody. I'm somebody, and I knew, and God knew. I knew, and God knew. I don't think I've ever said that in the 13 years nobody's going to know. I may have, but I don't believe I have. Because I know I'm somebody. I'm somebody today. If you play around with this, this is why we lose people in what they call relapsing. I don't like that word. It's a conscious choice. The book talks about, rarely have we seen a person fail that follows our path. Well, what's our path? It's honesty. The book continually tells us that we need to be honest, and honest with ourselves. That's very important, because if you can't be honest with yourself, you're not going to be honest. Am I 100% honest? I don't think so. I do the best I can. Am I more honest than I was 13 years ago? Yeah, about 95%, 98% more honest than I used to be. I still lie to myself, and that's where I have to be careful. I have to be careful. Every morning I hand everything over to God. Sometimes I take it back and I have to hand it to him several times a day. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I hand it over to God and he takes the wheel and I'm good. So I guess if I can say anything to the new person listening to that, honesty. Be honest with yourself. What is your history with drugs and alcohol? Take a look at your history with drugs and alcohol. That's all I got. Thank you.
Good stuff, Stephen. Thanks for sharing. You too, Ashley. Great topic, great bit of the book. This is where we get the phrase from: we have to concede to our innermost selves that we're alcoholic. And B goes on to say further in the book, probably no human power could relieve us of our alcoholism, and C, that God could and would if he was sought. So it's in the seeking, isn't it? The solution is to be practicing personal faith and trust and seeking and asking for help, isn't it? And listening in meetings and growing in understanding, understanding what we suffer from, obsession of the mind, a compulsion of the body. Delusion that has to be smashed. And that is really the nub of the issue. The delusion that we can live to use and use to live and carry on using, and manage the consequences, financial, marital, industrial, mental, physical, emotional, criminal, just continually using, chopping and changing substances. Where's the next one coming from? The weekend begins on a Thursday, ends on a Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday are just a matter of course then, and then the evening becomes tea time, which for our friends in America, tea time, and well, for us Northerners, tea time is about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 5:30. For any posh Southerners that happen to be in the room, I think they call that dinner time, but at any rate, we start using earlier in the evening, then in the afternoon, and then lunchtime, and then later of the night. So then we're just living to use, using to live round the clock. That is what active addiction looks like, and addiction is alcoholism. They're both the same thing, and that's why we use this book called Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything in here about alcoholism applies to a drug addict, and of course an alcoholic is a drug addict. Alcohol is a drug, and so getting clear of delusion, well, isn't that the journey of life? To walk in the truth and speak the truth. Tomorrow I will get up and suit up short, hopefully. Get into action and get into the solution again, and try and be productive and pack things into the stream of life. And that's all I've got. So I'm just trying to think who is, it's David next. David, and then I think after David, we then go to Stephen for his topic. Come on in, David.
Hi there. Yes. Always difficult to be the last person to share on an area, because you just go, yeah, well, to me, this really says unwilling to admit we're real alcoholics. It's about honesty. And we've talked about honesty. We talk about the first step, honesty, and then that leads to a higher power. Again, that's something we've talked about. So for me, I guess to add to this is the first thing that comes to mind is the gift of desperation. Realizing that where addiction is going to lead us is it's going to end with insanity and death. And that sounds like a very lonely sort of path to be on. And one of the promises of this program is it doesn't actually have to play out in that kind of way. It doesn't have to finish with insanity and death. It doesn't have to be a journey that's relatively short that ends in a very bad place. It can actually be a much longer journey, which can be done with other people who really understand where you're coming from, really understand who you are and the situation that you're in. By coming into these rooms, you're not going to be lonely in the same kind of way. You may well be in a place of work with friends, family that don't really understand where you're coming from with some of these things, but we probably do. And the next thing to also sort of look at is to realize no real alcoholic ever really regains control. What do I mean by that? Well, there's probably certain reasons why you're doing what you're doing. You probably want to work on those and sort them out. And then all of a sudden, the actual purpose for the drinking kind of has gone in a lot of ways. So for some people, like more normal drinkers, they might have a couple of beers to celebrate a party or somebody's birthday or a Friday. But generally speaking, they might go days, weeks, months, many, many, many celebrations without actually touching a drop. And that's not really what an alcoholic does, is it, really? And the other thing that's also worth pondering on is that this is a progressive illness. You might get intervals of stopping. They're not very long, and it tends to get worse the moment you pick back up again. The problems that you have continue to sort of get worse because you're not necessarily solving them. You're not necessarily living a better life. The actual solutions of what might actually help, they haven't presented themselves yet. But one thing that I really can say about this book, pretty much broadly, it's a positive journey, and there are many elements to it. They work in a particular order, and you're going to meet quite a lot of people along the way, which will be quite an interesting and quite a fun experience. We're not a glum lot. Thank you.
Beautiful. Great to hear, David. Thanks for sharing. Stephen, over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am on page 46, We Agnostics, and on page 46, I'm about 5 lines from the bottom up, and I'm going to read. We found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek him. To us, the realm of spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive, or forbidding. To those who earnestly seek it is open. We believe to all men, when therefore we speak of God, when therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. This applies to other spiritual expressions, which you will find in this book. Do not let your prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly seeking yourself, for honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. At the start, this is all we need to commence spiritual growth, to affect our first conscious relationship with God as we understood him. Afterwards, we found ourselves attempting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. That was growth. But if we wished to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So we used our own conception, however limited it was. We need to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I willing to believe, to believe that there is a power greater than myself? As soon as the man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderful, effective spiritual structure can be built. We are agnostics. Wonderful, wonderful chapter in the book. The way Bill Wilson wrote is incredible. I mean, what can I share on that, really? I mean, Bill Wilson knocked it out of the park. But it means something to all of us. What can I share on that? God does for me what I can't do for myself. Everything I think I know about God, I don't stop that from learning something new about God. God is constantly evolving and growing in me. Things happen in my life, spiritual people, heroes in this room, heroes in the program, friends of mine that are religious that aren't in this program. They shift me. They shift me towards God. And I'll close with this. It's interesting how Bill wrote. He writes about cornerstones as we go through the steps. He writes about cornerstones, and then at a point, he talks about the keystone for the arch we can walk through. Once you put that keystone in there, then you walk through the arch. and you walk to the other side. I am unapologetic about God. You can call him a higher power. You can call him creator of the universe. You can call him whatever you want. My belief is that when I die, this is my belief, and this doesn't have to be yours, this is mine. When I die, I'm going to walk in front of God, and I'm going to look at him, and he's going to have a hood, and I'm going to look into where that face is in that hood, and I'm going to see all the concepts that we believe in God. I'm just going to see him manifest in that, under that face. And then he's going to look at me and say, I am. That's my belief. And yeah, thank you very much for listening to me.
Beautiful, Stephen. And, I could listen to you for quite a while. Beautiful share. It is a great portion of the book. And, ultimately, and, for me, the higher power, the Lord Jesus Christ, is the King of the universe, the sovereign owner of all flesh. Men are like grasshoppers and the nations are as drops in the bucket. That's the reality. So when we're talking about God, we're talking about a sovereign King of the universe, so that's how I see things. And Bill Wilson was given wisdom. God wrote this book through a man, a man that had been given life. And I see him as a scribe, someone that simply wrote down what God gave him to write. So in terms of getting that power and that transformation, tradition 2 says, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God, as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. And step 11, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry it out. So clearly, obedience, acceptance, willingness, and power are the sort of keystones of what we talk about here. And improving that conscious contact. They discovered around the time of the writing of this book, this book was written in the late 30s, they made some discoveries early on. There was some of the folks got sober and they thought that could be it. They realized they needed to enhance, to build on their personal spiritual walk with God. They discovered they had to work with others to keep what they had. They were the early discoveries, and that's the reality of it. To live on a spiritual basis, to live according to spirit and not according to flesh. We are a program of complete abstinence. Abstinence is not for everybody, but that's what we are. And the idea is to be so busy practicing the assets in the power of God by the grace of God and living in the solution and the next right thing. And who can I help? No one to help myself. Get into your own personal spiritual literature, develop your own faith and trust, practice. The broader the foundation, the higher the point of freedom. It is a bridge to normal living. Don't just work the program, work the fellowship. It is a daily program of action. And it's a great bit of the book, Stephen. And, I think acceptance is the great thing, acceptance of reality, acceptance of the real status quo, getting clear of that delusion we read about a little while ago, walking in the truth, thinking the truth and speaking the truth. Because if you do that, you really don't need a good memory, which is pretty good because I don't have a very good memory. If you tell the truth, you don't need a good memory, and sobriety is a wonderful thing, fellas, and it's been real good to me. Anyway, that's enough out of me. Over to David. Come on in, David.
Yes, thank you. Well, what can we say here? So when this book was originally written, it has some old worldly language. It's from a different time. There's been a lot of debate about should we come back and rewrite it and sort of update it to be slightly more modern language. Broadly, the answer to that is no. because if it ain't broke, why fix it? This program, they tried lots of different things until they actually found a method of getting things to work. And then they wrote it down, and that took 164 pages. And who would imagine that a hopeless alcoholic could actually find some form of salvation and an actual life in only 164 pages? Now, if you've got the 4th edition, which is what I've been reading from in front of you, you find there's more than 164 pages in here. There's plenty in the back to be able to go and have a little perusal of. But broadly, this particular part of the book is, for me, the crux of it, which is this. It's about a higher power, and you might want to call them God, you might want to give a different name. That's completely down to you. That's between you and a higher power. Doesn't have to mean it's going to be the same as me or Paul or Stephen or Ashley or anybody else in your family, friends, or inside the room. So it's really an individual thing, a very personal thing. The next question is also here is, do you have to actually believe in order to be able to become sober? Well, you probably do, is my answer. So, does believe or willing to believe? Well, I fit in the willing to believe part. If you're going to sort of wander into this and go, there isn't a God, a higher power, well, that's a bit of a sort of sad sort of situation. I'm probably quite a forgetful and dishonest one, because when you're in absolute hell, maybe in front of a judge or about to meet a policeman, and you decided to pray at that point, you seem fairly confident that something existed. What we're discussing here is not so much what you do when faced with everything going horribly wrong and you'd like to win the lottery. This is a more gentle sort of approach to things, where you go, there probably is something bigger out there. And isn't that a wonderful idea? A wonderful idea that at certain moments in your life, you can just pause and hand over some of your problems to something else and actually find some respite. Isn't that a wonderful idea? That you only have to make a start at this stage of your sobriety. And the whole bit for me is not so much where I'm going to finish, it's more the journey of how I'm going to potter along in the next couple of moments, hour or two, day, heck, maybe even a week or 3. It's about spiritual growth. Now, if you decide to go and find a higher power, and the first one that you go looking for isn't for you, well, then by all means borrow mine. That's what I've said to people over the years. This is about growth in a spiritual context, which means starting where you are now and seeing where it goes next. And that's the real magic of it all. And I am sure as time passes, I probably will have more to say about what worked and what didn't work for me. But it kept me sober, it kept me sane, and it worked. And I'm sure I will have many more things of what I can recommend for spiritual growth, because I'm pretty much at the beginning of my journey, to be fair. But what I can say is this: it really helps. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Great to hear you. Thanks for sharing. Ashley. You're muted, Ashley.
Apologies, Paul. I think there was a slight problem with the signal. Sorry. Yeah, Ashley, drug addict. Thanks for everybody that read and shared their experience around that. I think I'm just grateful to be, sitting here talking to the wider audience and, the guys that are in the room around a solution, because for a long time I didn't really kind of grasp or understand a solution when it came to stopping using drugs and alcohol, really. yeah, like what touch on what others have said. It's the beauty of the program of being able to kind of well, not kind of, being able to find God in your own experience, and being able to kind of sit with yourself and be happy with everything around you, more importantly. And I'm far from perfect, but it is a program of action, like what's been discussed. And because ultimately, without any kind of program or without any kind of structure around the drug addiction with myself and possibly everybody else that suffers with this, I cannot live accordingly or sensibly to kind of foresee a positive future, because ultimately once I've got that idea to use, or I want to self-destruct, or it's just bad news, I'm not really wanting to kind of get into anything. And from the writers of the book, the 12 steps is it's, I think it is a personal journey for everybody that enters in the 12-step fellowship, and I can identify with so many things that are read on a daily basis, and listen to things, and and I think ultimately we're all trying to find a purpose and a reason not to use. We're all in this together. We're all trying to get to that place of just being neutral and and courageous, because we all want better lives as drug addicts and alcoholics, and this is the answer for it, really, I think. So I'm grateful to be sharing on here tonight, and had the privilege to come on and talk. But yeah, that's pretty much it. But any chapters I can read, Paul, or is that?
That was great, Ashley. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was great.
No
yeah, so yeah, well, I've got up on the screen. Welcome to Graham. Oh, he's gone. It's all right. Graham popped in. Okay, so I've got on the screen page 29 from the doctor's opinion. And I just want to read a little bit from there, where it says men and women. There it is. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontent, unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. Once they've succumbed to the desire again, the phenomena of craving develops. They go through the stages of a spree. They emerge remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. And this is repeated over and over. And unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of his recovery. Once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems they despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds him or herself easily able to control their desire for alcohol or drugs. The only effort necessary being required to follow a few simple rules. Moving down to 2 paragraphs. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. Though the aggregate of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort is considerable, we physicians must admit we've made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. I don't hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. And it talks about the phenomena of craving. So I just want to talk about this. Elsewhere we read of this entire psychic change. There's an appendix at the back of the book called The Spiritual Experience. The book talks about an emotional rearrangement, a change of personality. And it's a vital spiritual experience, an internal change. And of course, for me, the bigger picture is that God, the Creator, is already at work long before anyone gets to a 12-step meeting, gets any 12-step literature, or starts working the steps with a sponsor. The conscious contact is already there in step 1 when we look at unmanageability and powerlessness and consequences. God is already at work. Conscious contact begins there. When we get honest, we get transparent, and we get accountable. Once I share step 1 with somebody and get into literature, we become accountable and transparent. So this transformation happens, an emotional rearrangement, an inner change. And one of the great themes of this book is how that is produced. And we're very privileged today to have the experience now of how long, Stephen? 70, over 70 years, thinking about it now, over 80 years, something like 85 years of AA experience, and 42 years of CA experience, and 50 years of NA experience. We know how it works. It begins with honesty, transparency, open-mindedness, willingness, and staying in the solution, becoming accountable, developing a support network, working these 12 steps, regular meeting attendance, service commitments, and maintaining a solution-based lifestyle. And over the years, and I'll wrap it up with this and hand it over to you, David. We can all have a couple of minutes sharing on this topic if you'd like. The transformation through commitment to an entire new way of living is a wonderful thing. Over the years, I've seen real marriages healed. I've seen people that were unemployable become employable. Persons that have never worked get a job. I've seen homeless, crack and smack addicts become employed. I even know one that started a business. Weekend bingers get clean and save their marriage and their job and their mind and their body. I've seen many, many miracles over the years. So, if you're listening to this and you're struggling with addiction, you can get clean and you can stay clean and have a brand new way of life. And I'll hand it over to you, David.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. The key 2 words here to me are psychic change. So, in a nutshell, there's hope here. I don't need to go and talk about my particular parts of my life that were absolutely hellish whilst I was out in the madness. Some of it will be the same as you had. Some of it will be worse, and some of it will not be as bad. That's pretty much course of power. But what I can talk about is that things can improve and they can be better. And that means a change in outlook. So a psychic change, that's having a spiritual journey. That's looking at things differently. And it's a key cornerstone of all of this is actually a spiritual journey. If you try and skip over that part, sadly, you're probably going to be left in doing the same things in the same way with the same outcome, which is getting progressively worse. So the idea here is to have a change and go, well, if I look at things in a bad way, bad things tend to happen to me. I don't really have an explanation for that. It's just an observation. If I start to look at things in a positive way, then good things start to happen to me. Well, quite like the idea of more good things coming my way. And it turns out that's pretty much what a spiritual journey can enable, is that a moment can improve. And that is the benefit of it all. So different people can sort of say they're at different stages in their alcoholic career. Maybe they only just got started. Maybe they really have pushed it completely beyond all recognizable form. For those that have managed to make a start earlier than I did, well done. I was just slightly jealous of that. And for those that pushed it further than I did, well, welcome back. There is opportunity here. There is faith, hope, and courage to be had here, and a different outlook, a different way of going about living, one with more hope, more positive outlook, one with a better moment to come next. So thank you very much. My name's David, and I'm an alcoholic. This stuff really works.
It really does. Thanks for sharing. Ashley, do you want to come in for a minute or two, my brother?
Yeah, that'll be good, Paul. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for everyone sharing on that part of the book and, you know, their experience around this stuff. And, you know, the doctor's opinion is, you know, one of the first kind of chapters that I came to when getting familiarized with this book, you know, because ultimately, you know, the whole reason why I came into Cocaine Anonymous and the 12-Step Fellowship, you know, I'm reading these chapters and reading the doctor's opinion, as you know, as Paul, you know, beautifully read. You know, I was in trouble, to be honest. You know, I was in big trouble, you know, and hearing that, you know, there is a solution around you know, hearing that there is a solution within the fellowship was something I needed to hear, you know, and people were getting well. And because ultimately I didn't like the way that I was feeling. And, you know, as many interventions and as many things that people tried to lay on the table, that I kind of thought that I would be able to stop or anything like that, or, you know, it just didn't really work for me. Because, you know, I just didn't like the way that I felt around the internal feeling of that discomfort. And, you know, drugs was the solution. But, you know, the solution for me today is listening and carrying the message and helping the newcomer. So if there is anybody listening that's new or struggling, you know, there is a solution that you can find yourself and get some sort of sanity around that idea of using again, into a plainer, you know, restore that sort of mindset around using to this to this neutral way of living. But yeah, I'll leave it there, Paul. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Great to hear, my brother. Thank you. Stephen.
Yes, the doctor's opinion. Yeah, wonderful. You know, Dr. Silkworth was one of the foremost experts on alcoholism in the 30s. And, you know, don't get me, I mean, I may not have all my facts correct, but I understand that, you know, Bill Wilson was in Towns Hospital, and, you know, Lois at that point was just thinking about having him committed. You know, he just couldn't seem to beat this thing. And, you know, Bill Wilson had his spiritual experience in Towns Hospital. I often think, what would have happened if, you know, after Bill and Dr. Bob did this, they did nothing? Where would I be right now? You know, I don't know where I'd be. I don't think I would be sitting in a wonderful house with a wonderful wife. You know, like Paul was talking about. You know, 13 years ago, I was unemployable. I was resentful. I was mean. I was nasty. And I came from a good family. But, you know, for the last 12, 15 years out there using, you know, my alcoholism, my drug addiction took everything that my wonderful family taught me away from me. It took it all. And, you a psychic change and a spiritual experience is, what saves my butt and what continues to save my bacon. I do not live on the spiritual experience I had 13 years ago with my sponsor. I always say this: I smell more. I'm desperately seeking another spiritual experience. And it comes from within these rooms, working with others. It comes from a friend of mine that just passed away out here, a nice man, a rancher, a farmer like me, a very religious man, never touched drugs in his life. But that man was a spiritual mentor to me. He knew everything about me. I felt comfortable enough to disclose that with him. He knows as much about me as my wife does. And, he passed away a few days ago. I'm able to walk through that with grace and dignity. My brother died a year ago. I got the call when I was out working on the farm. I'm out in the middle of nowhere and I get a phone call that says your brother died. Not once did I think I need a shot of whiskey. Not once. God is real. God is real. And, if you want to argue with me about that, go away. Go away. I love Dr. Silkworth. I love the book. For the new people out there, just give it a chance. That's what I did. What do you got to lose? It's one of the things my sponsor said to me when I first met him. What do you got to lose, Steve? I have a lot to lose. A horrible life. A life filled with fear and resentments and anger, dishonesty. I had a lot to lose, and I've lost those things. I live a blessed life. My life isn't perfect. I have good and bad days. But I'll say it again, I'm able to walk through these things with grace and dignity. Dr. Stepwork told Bill Wilson, after Bill had his spiritual experience in the hospital, he said, I don't know what happened, Bill, but you need to hang on to this. You need to hang on to this. And that's what I do. I hang on to this. I hang on with my life because my life depends upon hanging on to this. I don't want to go back to where I was. I don't want to. I'm recovered, but if I don't do what this book tells me, I can get sick again. I stay in all three parts of the program. Back to you, Paul. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Stephen, and thanks to you, David and Ashley. It's been a wonderful meeting. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. So on the screen, I've got information about Zoom meetings. There is hundreds and hundreds every single week. Don't be afraid to come on Zoom thinking you'll have to put your camera on. Only about a fifth of attendees do put the camera on. Nor will you be required to speak. You're more than welcome to come along and listen. Conversely, if you want to share, you'd be able to share. So there's lots and lots of meetings. You're welcome at them all. Zoom is a simple app and free to download and use. So please take a look at that. If you have any questions or you want to get involved, reach out in the conversation wherever you see this posted. Stay connected and stay safe. Once again, I just want to take this moment to thank you, David, for coming along this evening.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
Always great to hear you. Ashley, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you ever so much, Paul. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Top man, thanks, Ashley. And Stephen, always a pleasure to hear you, my friend.
Thank you so much. And it was an honor to be here with my three fellow brothers walking the spiritual path.
Thank you so much for coming along, fellas. I'm sure we can do something similar again in the near future. Until next time, family, stay strong, stay safe.